This is the first time I've been in a nightclub in the morning where I think I'm going to remember actually leaving. This is a pretty cool venue. Um, I can't remember the exact name of the talk that is in the program, but what we're going to try and do here is go through the policy landscape uh, for crypto in like 20 minutes. So we're going to hit the highlights, maybe lowlights, depending on your perspective, and talk a little bit about maybe what the macro outlook is for the next year, 6 months, whatever, and then maybe have some time for questions for folks that have them. I know government is not everyone's favorite thing usually at a crypto conference. My background is I started in government. I worked for the U.S. Senate Homeland Security Committee back in 2009 to 2013 and did some early work into what we called digital currencies at the time. That was when Mt. Gox was still very much up and running, and so was Silk Road, and Razzle Khan wasn't rapping, so they were very simpler, more beautiful times. But after that, I went to lead policy for Coinbase, and then spent some time working with some big international banks, doing some bigger picture fintech blockchain work. And now my firm, FS Vector, we work with fintech companies across the board, but predominantly I work with crypto companies on all issues related to licensing and regulatory and political. So we're going to get into it. This is my kind of self-created title to hopefully accomplish this. That's our good friend Ryan Selkis, who loves talking about regulatory issues and has definitely his own perspectives on it, some of which I don't not share. But I also want to thank whoever 0xSat is, who I stole these pictures from. I don't know if anybody else had this come across their algorithm this past week. I just thought that was like one of the. I have no idea who this man is or where he came from, and I don't want to know because I think it's very pure. But hopefully 0xSat, thank you for that. All right, I covered this. Here's the meta outlook, and I took meat space from my friend Kristen Stone, who I don't think Kristen's here anymore, but we used to work together at Coinbase, and she gave a talk earlier today. Because I like the term meat space because it's kind of gross. But it's a good way to talk about the real world, perhaps, especially these days. But look, this is a very, very obvious point, but it's very clear to people in the regulatory world, whether it's in the US or abroad, that the future of money is very much here or very, very close to being here. And we'll talk mostly about sort of the financial applications. Again, we only have 20 minutes, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. And from just the bit of time that I've been able to spend at some of the sessions so far, like just seemingly innumerable different applications and products that folks here are building and working on. So we're going to try and cover probably mostly the financial stuff. Sorry, can you hear me now? Is that a little better? Sorry, I'll talk more into the mic. So we're going to talk a bit about like the financial pieces of this, but obviously there are others, and we'll probably dig into it as we can. So this is good. We're getting the attention that we wanted. The bad part is that we're getting the attention that like we wanted, and if it's not informed correctly, if the vantage points being taken by regulators, whether here in the U.S. or abroad, then we're going to be in for a world of trouble. And we're starting to see signs on both sides that I think the right message and the right information is getting through, but a lot of indications that we are maybe not directionally headed where we as an industry want to be, and where we'll really truly be able to like do really cool stuff for the world if it goes the other way. So, I think for folks that even just sort of pay like a little bit of attention to this, it's been pretty clear that over the past year even, I think over the past year we had more attention than we had the remaining years, like after the Bitcoin white paper was launched. In terms of regulatory pronouncements, attention, it's just not even comparable. Crypto regulation, I borrowed this from our friends at Elliptic. This was the world of crypto regulation in 2015, mostly just like shoulder shrug, like I don't care, is essentially, I think, how I took the regulatory stances at the time. And then this is 2021, right? Lots of different people coming out with lots of different thoughts and positions, some of which good, some of which bad. This is just a pretty basic Google search trend from 2017 about cryptocurrency regulation. I didn't map this to the market, price market for, name your coin, but having been in this industry long enough, like I feel like I know it. It feels very similar to this. And as you can see, probably that really large bump there, that was the infrastructure bill that many of you are probably very familiar with because it really lit the world on fire, or at least crypto Twitter on fire. And we'll talk a bit about that in a second too. So here are the three pieces that I want to touch on as it pertains to the regulatory landscape. One is, because we're here in the US, we're going to talk about the US, and it does obviously affect any number of other different jurisdictions because many countries do look to the US and many international bodies look to the US for leadership on this stuff. We'll talk a bit about some specific international jurisdictions, and then we'll talk a bit about what's happening in the industry and what's happened in the industry maybe the past year. Some of you, many of you I know are probably involved in some of these initiatives already. Some of you may not and just hear about it, so want to talk a bit about that. So in the United States, we've got three pieces here, actually four pieces. But the last piece of states we'll cover really quickly. So I think the big thing to watch out for over the next few weeks is going to be the executive order that is expected out of the White House. So we've been expecting this executive order for 2 weeks, for the past 6 months, but it really apparently is going to happen in the next 2 weeks. The current reporting, and this is everything that we understand is maps to what's being reported out publicly now, is that there is a bit of a drama between Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen and the White House staff regarding what should be in this executive order, if anything. An executive order sounds really important, and it is really important, but I think the expectations for this is that it is not that the White House is going to say there is now a brand new law for how crypto assets are going to be regulated by the SEC. That's not what this is going to be. The expectation is going to be the president saying, look, agencies, show us your work, show us what you've done, share more information. They may appoint a crypto czar. The term czar is often used. It is not an official position, an appointed position in any formal way where like the Senate has to confirm. It's usually just somebody to say, hey, this is the line of responsibility. Person X is now going to be the czar of the pandemic or the czar of healthcare.gov or whatever it is. So I think there is an expectation that there'll be a crypto czar. And it's going to be probably mostly focused around the issues with stablecoins. The presidential working group that President Biden put together, which a presidential working group is just a bunch of different agencies coming together to talk about issues, share research. They issued a report about stablecoins a few months ago. There were several congressional hearings about it. I think this is going to be a carry-on of a lot of that work. But when this happens, it's going to get a lot of attention, and we are going to get at least another a sense of what the next steps forward for this administration will be. The SEC, some of you, there's obviously so many different things going on at the SEC at any given time, especially with the current chair, Gary Gensler, and his treatment and attention to the industry, which is high. But more recently, probably about a month ago, the SEC issued proposed amendments to alternative trading system regulations. You can do your own research on this, and I'm happy to provide some good references and things that, frankly, my firm's put together in terms of like background documents on it. But the problem for the crypto industry is one piece of it in particular, which essentially would call all communication protocols exchanges if they are facilitating trades. So that's super problematic for folks that are building DeFi applications. It's super problematic, frankly, for people who like run Bloomberg terminals too, right? It's broader implications than just crypto, but because the language in there is so broad, it seemingly could capture a lot of different things. So it was one of these big, I think it was 800 some pages that was dropped, and you had 30 days to comment on it, which usually indicates they don't really want you to comment on it, or they probably have a good idea of what the final one's going to be. But I think that comment period's actually wrapping very soon, within the next few days. I know a number of folks in industry are putting together comments for it, and we will see what the final looks like, but that will be expected in the next few months. with Congress, I don't think I need to tell folks even that just pay like a little bit of attention to the political landscape of the United States that Congress is broken in a lot of very, very serious ways in terms of how we're able to get legislation done or not done. Having said that, Congress does still play a really, really important role in passing budgets for the United States, in doing oversight hearings and investigations and all kinds of other different things. And so where Congress has been spending its time and its power is really on that oversight function over the past few months. And again, I should know the exact number of hearings over the past year versus the past 10 years prior, but seemingly every week there's been another crypto hearing, when there were, for years, even when the industry was really growing and people were raising tons and tons and tons of money, there just weren't hearings. People just didn't care. So that is where Congress is spending most of its time right now. And then in terms of legislation, look, the infrastructure bill in how it helped pay for itself had a provision that essentially, clarified the definition according to the language of like what a broker would be, thus like requiring certain information to be reported to the IRS so that they could capture tax gains from people that they believe are trading crypto but not reporting it on their taxes, okay? That got a lot of attention. It kind of came out of nowhere, and we'll talk a bit about some of the after effects of that. But in terms of other pieces of legislation, 35 bills were introduced in 2021. I think we're expecting probably double that this year. I think they're going to be really important to watch. I think it's going to be very unlikely any of them pass, at least in whole. There's some really important ones that Congressman Soto just came out with one regarding stablecoins, Token Taxonomy Act that Congressman Warren Davidson has offered for a number of years now. These are really important and they're discussion pieces, but I think it's important that every time there's a bill that comes out that, the community just sort of understand that like there is a process here, and usually that is just the beginning of a multi-year process when a bill like that comes out. On the international side of things, again, the Canada, I don't think we need to, I'm merely highlighting it because this is very timely. I think what's going on in Ottawa, and this is not a political statement one way or the other, it really isn't, but it is showing the ability and the interest in governments to impact censorship-resistant digital payments. I'll put it that way. And I think I don't know if it's a wake-up call for folks, but I think it's certainly of concern to a lot of people in crypto and out of crypto. And I think it's not necessarily probably the last time we're going to see, actions like this. I don't know if we would see something. We've seen similar things in the U.S., not, I think, to the degree that we've seen in Canada, but I think there's going to be massive repercussions and ripple effects from this, both in terms, I think, of how this community builds and where they build various applications, and just generally what I think the tact of political positioning will be, even with folks that aren't, let's just say, crypto radicals. I think this is pretty surprising. In Europe takes forever to do everything, seemingly. So they have something called MiCA, which is Markets and Crypto Asset Regulation, and that really aims to harmonize the regulatory frameworks between the EU countries. That's sort of ongoing. I think there's an expectation that be put into like full impact by end of 2023, if I remember correctly. But the only other pieces that I would say are most active in Europe right now are just continued discussions around digital euros. As many countries are talking about central bank digital currencies, that's a huge focus to Europe. And then recently, I think the end of last year, they formally said that the travel rule should apply to cryptocurrency transactions. This was a long time coming, not necessarily surprising, but probably the most important action that you saw. And then in terms of like just supranational stuff, it really has been CBDC focused. If you look at like the Basel Committee, you look at IMF, you look at some of these big international bodies, they've been very, very, very focused on CBDC research. They've left sort of these market participant regulators and that sort of thing to the individual countries, and I think you're going to continue to see that. Spare, what I would say, the Basel Committee is very focused on financial stability. In terms of the industry, look, I think it has been really amazing. You know, as someone who has spent every day of their life since 2009 on cryptocurrency public policy, it has been really awesome to see the amount of activity and excitement and investment and interest in this space from folks who are even just sort of casual crypto connoisseurs to some of the biggest investors and companies in the space. It's been incredible. And I think the three things that are worth pointing out are, from the policy perspective, you're seeing really substantive, thoughtful policy proposals from the industry, both trade associations and individual groups and companies. That's great. I'm not endorsing any of them, but it's good to finally start having something to work from, rather than sort of constantly sort of responding to things that are being given to you. There's been a proactivity that has been really, really, really refreshing and awesome to see. I think we're going to continue to see that. And I think backing that up, you're seeing enormous amounts of political investment being made in new political action committees, by individual companies and investors specifically. I think you're going to see that continue to grow. And then sort of just generally a more activity on behalf of coalitions of companies or trade associations. You know, the Blockchain Association and Coin Center in particular, you know, have been around for a while and have done tremendous work and are doing more and more work. So those are things you're going to continue to see, I think, bubble up over the next year. Okay, yeah. So real quick, in terms of like, why does this matter? I mean, look, the stablecoins piece of it affects this industry in all the ways that you understand it to affect this industry. And it very much is on the minds of regulators. And they're really trying to figure out how to deal with it. And there is an assumption that it needs to be dealt with in some way, which is not a great place to be, I think. The problem's going to be you're not going to have something that comes from the White House tomorrow that says, okay, this is exactly how it needs to be, just like fill out your application and stand in line and, you know, you guys can go off to the races and run a stablecoin project. It's going to be really, really messy for a while. I think the best hope we can have is that there just isn't continued regulation by enforcement. You're going to see more enforcement actions, but that hopefully that is not the only way in which we're getting clarity on things. And I think it would behoove the industry to really push to make sure that doesn't occur. DeFi, you know, look, I have so much respect for the folks that are building stuff in this space because there is a lot. The lack of clarity is not just sort of a business, like commercial issue. It's an issue of real personal liability for people and their families. And so how do we get to a place where we don't, whether, you know, maybe you like living under a mask and having a handle on an avatar, that's cool, but maybe you don't. And so if you don't, you should be able to, you know, make products and companies and work for products and companies and not have to feel that you have to do that. DAOs, admittedly, and God, I mean, there's so much amazing stuff that I've seen at this event on DAOs already. There's been very little attention paid, really, from regulators in a meaningful way to the applications that I think many DAOs are working on. That needs to change. And then I think the biggest thing is like finding the political will, and I think the industry's finding that and has found it over the past few months, but that needs to increase. And so, you know, if I could just leave you with one or two things, you know, this is a really, 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 really pivotal moment in history in terms of politics, in terms of where the technology is. You guys are building really cool stuff, and you're some of the smartest people in the world. Keep doing it. Like, build stuff that people actually want to use and that like real people want to use, and they can use it really easily. And I think with the political stuff, it is exciting to see all the investment and things that are happening. But like anything, whenever there's a bubble of investment or interest, you can have people that don't necessarily have the industry's best interest in mind. So as you personally or your organization look to how you guys want to enact your political vision or will as it relates to regulatory landscape, just make sure you do your research on who you're working with and what they're about, and that they have your interest in mind when you do that. So thanks very much. I really appreciate your time, and have a great rest of the time in Denver.